Hi everyone, I'm Breanna. I just finished up my fifth and final year at Cal State Fullerton. I'm an applied math major with a computer science minor. I want to start off by just saying that I didn't know that I was interested in STEM until like my second year of college. So you guys are already way ahead of me, but that was something that I found very intimidating, is that a lot of people around me seemed like, oh, I've been interested in math since I was like 5 years old. But that's not everybody. You can still do awesome things, even if it takes you a while to figure out what you want to do. So if you don't know yet, you're still fine. And with that being said, I did choose math because I think that it's really versatile, especially now with everything being very data driven. Math is very applicable in a lot of fields. My first research project was at CSUF. I modeled the shape of large soap bubbles. So soap bubbles, when they're, the regular size that you would blow out of a soap wand, are perfectly spherical. But as soap bubbles get larger, like bigger than you or me or a building, gravity pulls down on the soap bubble. And so we wanted to know how much gravity flattens the shape. And that has applications in building large inflatable structures. And we use MATLAB to find solutions. So if you're into coding, there's a lot of coding opportunities in math. My second project was a summer research project at Yale University in a cognitive science lab. So what I wanted to do is, if you consider a scene where you're walking through a forest and you see a stack of rocks, something probably makes you think that someone stacked those. They didn't just randomly happen. And so we wanted to look at what helps us think that somebody stacked those as opposed to that it happened randomly. So I developed a probabilistic model using physics simulation to help us understand whether it was created by a person or randomly fell there. So that's something that I did there. I used Python and a software called Blender to do that one. And my last one I did at the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard, another summer program. And I was working in a biotech lab. The lab had just created a new sequencing tool that can allow you to get spatial gene expression data. Now you might know that all of our cells have the same genome, but our hair cell is different from our eye cell, is different from our skin cell, and yet somehow they all do different things with the same genome. So understanding what genes are being expressed in each cell can tell us a lot about what each cell is doing. So now this tool allows us to get a spatial idea of what's happening within a different tissue. The lab wanted to use this to study diabetic kidney disease, so they wanted to figure out what diabetic kidney disease is doing. And so they had this tool, they had this data, and my job was to come in and to develop methods to analyze this data. So I used spatial statistics to determine patterns within the data that might allow us to understand kind of what's going on in the kidney and give them something to target with a treatment. Honestly, I went into college like kind of just vaguely interested in a lot of things. All I really knew was that I wanted to help people. And I thought maybe I could study genetics and be a genetic counselor, but I had a professor specifically who said, hey, you should try math. And looking back at it, I'm very glad that I decided to do math, because genetics and genomics is a lot of math. So I am going into a grad school program in a human genetics department. So I was passionate about genetics before, and I've brought it back around to go to genetics again now after kind of a roundabout way of experimenting with lots of different projects. So a lot of my research has been code-based specifically. So something that was very challenging for me at first was just, learning the language. But even once you learn a language, sometimes you'll need to use the code for a very specific functionality that you've never done before. So a surprising amount of coding research is really just Googling, seeing what functions work, how they work, troubleshooting your code, stuff like that. When I was talking about the cognitive science physical modeling project that I did, specifically, I was using Python within this software called Blender. So I was using Python, but I was also using Blender Python, which is like a whole other ball game. So a lot of challenges that I've specifically faced are just figuring out how to make your code work correctly. And if coding is something that you end up doing, you'll also see that. So pure mathematics is a lot of proofs. And for me, as somebody who is honestly reluctant to do math in the first place, I was very intimidated of doing the proofs. I also thought that applied math had a lot more real world applications. Like I mentioned, I was interested in math because I thought it would be very versatile and applicable to a lot of field. But as it turns out, now I know I do like proofs, and applied math is also, not applied math, excuse me, pure math is also applicable to a lot of real world concepts. We're increasingly using things like topology, which is a field in pure math for like topological data analysis, and stuff like that. Number theory is the basis of cryptography. So, and even if a pure math subject doesn't have an implementation right now, it probably will sometime within our lifetime. We'll find some sort of real world application for it. So I know at Cal State Fullerton, I did another summer project. It was really short, so I didn't mention it, but I worked with, I worked with 3 other students on that one, actually, to answer the group question. One of them was a grad student. One of them was me, who had taken only calculus. And the other one was a transfer student who had taken, I think, 1 class more than calculus. But the 4th guy was a high school student. So Cal State Fullerton, especially if you are involved in the math circle and you know a couple of the professors there, they'll work with you. But there are also specifically summer research programs that are geared towards high school students. So this summer might be a little rough trying to find one, both because of COVID-19 and also because the summer is about to start. Normally, I think those applications are due in like February or March. But yeah, so they're undergrad summer research programs, but they're also high school summer research programs. So yeah, you can do math. Even if you maybe haven't taken calculus yet, yeah, you can still probably do it. So specifically, the lab that I was working in was a developmental and computational lab. So they were trying to use and understand how like infants learn to learn, I guess, and try to see if they can implement how that happens into helping a computer learn. So we wanted to understand how we can tell a computer that like a person was here. And so one of the ways that we do that is by trying to understand how we understand that a person was here. So we propose that one of the ways that we can do that is by trying to evaluate how likely it is that a given configuration of objects is to occur without somebody stacking it. So like I mentioned, I used a program called Blender, and the situation that we looked at is we had a cone that was raised above the ground, and then we had blocks that would fall through this cone. And basically the program would record where each of these blocks landed. And I did that just like thousands of times. So I had all this data about where blocks could possibly land. And so what I did from there is I created these different scenes with the same number of blocks. Some of them were just, they looked random. I would have said, yeah, okay, that might have just happened if they fell through the cone. Some of them had some elements of order in them, which is something that we thought might make humans more likely to say, oh, somebody stacked that, or somebody like arranged that. So stacking, for example. Also like something that's perfectly arranged in a circle maybe, or exactly equidistant away from the hole. You might look at that and be kind of wary about whether it happened naturally. Yeah, so it really depends. In the summer research programs that I went to, one of them, the grad student that I worked with just told his, mentor, like, hey, I want a research assistant over the summer so that she can work on this piece of my project. So my job when I went there that summer was to work on that piece of his project. Sometimes that's not necessarily the case. Sometimes you get to do a whole self-contained project. It really depends on what you're looking for. And sometimes, like in my project with the bubbles, that professor was looking for research students, and I was like, I don't know what I want to do research in, so like, let's just do whatever. And so I started that project, like I began working on it from the beginning, but I didn't have to, define my own research question or things like that. If you have the opportunity to define your research question, I think that that's a really valuable thing. But sometimes as an undergrad, that can be really hard for 2 reasons. One, because, a lot of the times the professors that you want to work with already have ideas. And so if you don't come to them with a well-defined idea, they might just be more inclined to say, hey, like, why don't we just work on this? Let's just try this. And 2, it's difficult to come up with a well-defined idea when you're brand new to the field and don't even know about what research has been done, what research is currently going on. So I highly recommend that at some point you get the opportunity to put together your own question. It took me until my 5th year. I got to make my own project up. I just did a literature review to try to see, what was going on, but it was still really fun just to think about like, What's a plausible research question that I can answer? That's a good skill, I think, to have. I think that one thing I wish I knew was that a lot of people don't know what they're doing, so don't stress so much about not knowing what you're doing. Like I mentioned, I was interested in a lot of things, but nothing had really struck my interest yet. And you're told to pick your major before you even get to college. So once you get to college, and you're like, oh my gosh, I still don't know what I want to do, even though I picked this major. I changed majors. A lot of my friends changed majors. Um, I tried 4 or 5 different research projects that two of them that I didn't even talk about before I picked something that I liked, and found something that I was really passionate about. So I think, a lot of the times when people are telling you about their story and how they got to where they are, they tell it like a story, because that's the most compelling way to do it. They tell it in like a linear fashion, like, oh, I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this, and they all fit together. Um, but a lot of the times it's just like retroactively applied after, like they were probably just going along and doing their thing. And then all of a sudden it was like, this is what I want to do. So yeah, people don't know what they want to do. A lot of people didn't know what they want to do, and they found it. You'll find it. Don't worry about it. Yeah, thank you for having me. Nice to meet you.